Welcome back to our final panel. The last but not the least, the best way to finish is looking for the one that we are going to leave behind, the legacy for the young generations, core players for a greener and climate resilient society. Climate change is a reality with lifelong consequences where agreements have had little impact. Commitments to take the reins of the future is quite imperative. Therefore, we meet Cassia Moraes, founder and CEO at Youth Climate Leaders, a social enterprise that trains and connects young people with networks and opportunities to start their careers as climate leaders. Previously, she had served as a deputy executive coordinator at the Brazilian Forum on Climate Change. Cassia holds an MBA in Development Practice degree from Columbia University. Cassia, hi and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I would like to present a little bit how young people are already taking leadership to tackle climate change based on our own experience. But I think perhaps before we need to talk a little more about the general issues that are involved with climate change and the young people action. Children and youth worldwide, they are sending a message to us. Greta, for example, has been leading the Fridays for Future movement, and she was emphatic. Why should we go to school if we will have no future? With her simple act of defiance, she taught us that an important lesson. Most of us are living our lives the most pressing crisis humanity has ever seen is not happening. But it will solve itself, but it won't. Given the most aspects of climate change will persist over centuries, the higher levels of temperature increases can result in positive feedbacks that will leverage warming even more. It's about time that someone would press the emergency button. Yet, after 25 years discussing what to do on annual UN conferences, change is far from what is needed. We are seeing now today that we have the meeting with Biden and other chief of states to press for more action, but it's been over 25 years that this has been discussed in the international arena. And even if the Paris Agreement were achieved, we should still expect an increase in the Earth's average temperature of about 3 Celsius, which is 2 times the threshold the scientists recommend to avert a global catastrophe. We already have a planet almost 1 degree Celsius warmer than pre-industrial levels. Therefore, our carbon budget, the amount of greenhouse gas that we can still emit, is low, and change should be fast and radical. YCL does offer solutions for 2 of the main challenges threatening the future of young people in the 21st century, which is the climate crisis and structural unemployment. Although young people make up the majority of the global population, they continue to encounter barriers to job opportunities and economic security while dealing with uncertain future due to climate crisis. It's this urgency that the fast-growing child and youth-led movement for climate action demands. We are not asking politely anymore. It is too late for that. While policymakers are right now negotiating business as usual improvements, we are starting a revolution. Every day, we are building this new world that needs to emerge. We build it when we choose a bicycle or a vegetarian meal instead of a burger. We build it when we decided to dedicate our life and career to finding a solution to a problem we did not create, but we must solve anyway. We build this world that we deserve together, a world that is more just and sustainable than the one in which we were born. This is not a war against older generations, though. Only an intergenerational movement will take us where we have to go. Nevertheless, we need to push back as most of the decisions about those issues are being made by people that are older and which might not be here to see the worst consequences in case they fail. It is a matter of climate justice too. Children, youth, and the future generations will be more affected by the worst impacts of climate change. Maybe because of that, we also tend to bring more ambitious options to the table. While government officials talk about the intensification of livestock, for example, as a solution, we are creating new alternatives to meat, such as the Impossible Burger. The good news, though, is that tackling the climate crisis might also be a unique opportunity to include millions of young and older people in the new climate economy. So, this is the kind of message that we want to bring to young people through our organization. That is a very serious issue, but we cannot just get depressed with and overwhelmed by everything that we're learning about climate change. We need to get together and start building solutions. But for that, of course, we need help of the older generations. We need funding. We need access to space like this that we are now today. And we, as youth climate leaders, we are responding to this all those problems in a very simple way. Our solution has three main components. The first one is what we call the learning journeys, because we believe that we have to train all these young people that are passionate about the issue, and so they can get the abilities they need to work on this new climate economy, are very different from previous generations, and even from what we learn on university. Is a very fast growing environment, so we need lifelong learning, and this is something that we offer on our network. The second pillar is the network itself, which is a global community of practice with members from different countries and areas of expertise, which interacts online and develop projects at local hubs worldwide. We already have hubs in Brazil, US, Portugal, and Italy, and our plan is to expand because we know that this is a global issue and we need to combine local efforts with this global network so that we can exchange best practices. And finally, but as important, is the access to professional opportunities. Members of our network, they have access to mentorship, climate vacancies, and participation in global events. And this is very important because as a specialized area, it's difficult to get entry-level jobs. It's very difficult to land a job on climate change. And we want to change that to showcase that young people can not only learn more about it and protest and do all those things that are necessary, but they can also dedicate their professional lives in finding solutions to climate change. And there are various examples of that. Our main goal is to empower a diverse group of young people, leaders from all over the world with leadership entrepreneurial skills that are going to be used right now to address climate change. With this unique approach, we thus transform a daunting challenge as the climate crisis into an opportunity to include millions of young people through the emerging climate economy. I will talk more about the climate crisis later and finalize with concrete examples from our network. But first, I'd like to focus on the unemployment threat that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, which is a pressing issue in all Europe. And Portugal is among the most vulnerable countries for unemployment, youth unemployment, with around 26% of the young population right now with no jobs. Today, a young person is three times more likely to be unemployed than adults, even as collectively they represent the largest percentage of the world's potential labor force. And current events like the COVID-19 pandemic have further exasperated the disenfranchisement of youth, putting millions at the risks of economic and social exclusion, while stressing underlying gender issues. More than one third of all young women in the world are jobless and not in education or training. If finding regular job is already difficult nowadays, landing a job in climate crisis is almost a heroic feat. And I know this by my own experience. At the same time, a crucial part of climate adaptation in cities and anywhere is to have qualified human resources to lead the transition to zero carbon societies. If we are serious about tackling climate change, hundreds of millions of people will need to work on policies and projects that will enable us to succeed. So we better start training them right now. To address climate change, we need youth innovative ideas, passion, and courage to dream and build the future we want. Among the members of our network, we have interesting examples of how young people are already taking action to tackle the climate crisis. I would like to bring some of them. Last year, we did what we call Unleash Hack. It's in partnership with Unleash, a global organization to foster youth action on SDGs. And on this hack, we had two different initiatives that were among the winners. They are very interesting. First, Ambiental Kink. There is a digital platform to connect tourists with local people through providing more visibility to local entrepreneurs and engage them, like the tourists, with local communities. It's very interesting to highlight that because although this initiative was in the context of Brazil, Portugal is also a country with a lot of tourism and other countries in Europe as well. It's important to find ways that we can have different kinds of tourism related to sustainable development. Other initiatives that are happening that we are seeing here for remote works, for example, Madeira Island. So there are several opportunities to think of new ways to foster tourism in the context of the pandemic, but also the context of climate change and finding ways that will have less emissions, that will give a good impact instead of pollution and other issues that we know are a reality. The second example that I would like to give is called Turtle Box, and is an alternative to a problem that is like increased worldwide with the pandemic, but it was a problem before, which is the use of plastic when we have the apps for meals such as iFood. So Turtlebot comes to solve this problem through reverse logistics and using reusable packages. So instead of just throwing away your package after consuming, you can also reuse it with this option so that you can give back the package to the restaurant or to a collection center. And with that, we are not going to generate a lot of trash, which is overall environmental problem, but also impacts climate change as plastic, use oil. The other two examples, one of them is in Portugal. It's called Shimejito, and it's an interesting way to produce mushrooms in your own house or your property because they're developing urban farms that can start as small as 17 square meters. And with this, you can have an option to increase your income combined with other activities. And you can also revitalize the countryside, making a mix of remote work and more affordable cost of living that the countryside of Europe offers, with opportunities to talk to other potential farmers, and which is very important. They are working to produce over 300 jobs in the next few years just with those small farms. So it might be an interesting way to generate additional income and also to provide opportunities for young people. And finally, it's very interesting to highlight options of renewable energy in a more local and even community scale. Revolusolar is doing that by building energy cooperatives in Brazilian slums. So they collaborate to address the poor quality of energy services added to the high price and marginalization of the favela dwellers. And we know that it's not a problem only in developing countries. Portugal is among the countries with more energetic poverty in Europe. So perhaps combining small scale renewable energy with business models such as the ones that Revolusolar developed might be a way to power many houses in the country, and mostly in winter that we know that is a huge issue, not having access to energy or high prices. So this is interesting. And also, which is very important, both Shimejito and Revolusolar, they offer professional development programs to generate local jobs. So they are not only doing that on their communities, but they are training young people, local young people, on how to do either like plant mushrooms or install solar panels. And with that, they will start building their own careers, which is very important to, in this moment that we are living, to provide solutions. Finally, I really like this phrase from our partner, Wake Carbon, that understanding climate change is a critical competence of any professional of the future. So we believe that young people worldwide and in Europe, we should be learning about climate change on our universities, but after that as well. And now that we are preparing the green recovery after the pandemic, we should invest in training and in reskilling not only young people, but all our population that are still looking for jobs. And climate change might be an effective way to do that, to give hope and a better future while you are building a better future. So this, I think, is the message that I would like to pass. And join us to accelerate careers and professionals for climate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cassia. Thank you so much for sharing this with us and all the projects and all the ideas for youth in Brazil and all over the world. And now it's time to talk with Raquel Gaião Silva. Raquel is passionate about communication and ocean sustainability. She is the executive advisor of BlueBioValue Alliance, where she manages all the organization's daily tasks. Raquel is a Portuguese All-Atlantic Ocean Youth Ambassador. Today, Raquel, I would like to ask you something. How can youth contribute with blue sustainable solutions to fight the climate crisis?
Hello, thank you for the invitation to be here. It's an honor to be present with such inspiring panelists side by side, so I'm looking forward to listen to all of you. Yes, today I'm going to talk about how you can contribute with blue sustainable solutions to fight climate crisis. But the first thing I want to acknowledge is that the ocean has really taken a big hit from climate change. Climate change causes a triple threat for the ocean. For better or worse, the ocean absorbs 90% of the heat emitted by humans through greenhouse gases, and this has many impacts in our ocean. One of the impacts is the sea level rise that we all know from the melting of the ice sheets and the glaciers, but also because the water expands when the temperature increases. Then there is this bleaching of warm water coral reefs that needs these algae, and the algae that live inside of the tissues have a limit of thermal stress, and if you reach this limit, they will just leave the coral or die, leaving also the coral to die. So this is also a big problem. Another thing that the warming of water temperature is causing is the more frequency of the toxic algae blooms that impact many organisms, marine organisms, but also humans, and that are also causing less oxygen in the water, together with the fact that warmer waters have less oxygen dissolved in the water. So this is also a problem. And then the ocean also captures 25% of the CO2, which is causing the ocean to be more acidic and having a lot of impacts in the marine life. For example, the shells of the shrimp and the crabs are being dissolved because the water is so acidic, and this is a problem. So all this is leading to disruptions in the marine food web and is causing impacts on fisheries and the global food security. So how to fight climate crisis and preserve marine life at the same time? Of course, the first thing we have to do is to capture carbon by restoring and protecting forests on land, but we also have to do that underwater. Did you know that there is marine forest underwater? Actually, here in Portugal, we have 3 types of ecosystems of marine forests. The kelp forest that you can see here in the middle of the slide, the salt marsh above, and the seagrass meadows below in the slide. And the main difference between these terrestrial forests and the marine forest is that most of the marine forests capture more carbon in the soil. It's the case of seagrasses, salt marshes, and mangroves that we so often see in more temperate, in more tropical regions. So when we depend on fisheries that use trawling and that really disrupt the soil of the ocean, and also when we are always dredging our estuaries, this is contributing to climate change. And we really need to talk about this. You are already doing something if you at home talk with your family and friends about marine forests and how we can protect them. Then we have to reduce the emissions, of course. But what I want you to tell you about is, usually we talk more about CO2, but the methane and the nitrous oxide are also very important here. The methane is very commonly emitted through the livestock, and the methane has a capacity of trapping the heat 80 times more than CO2. And the nitrous oxide has 268 times the capacity of trapping the carbon, the heat. So this worries me, and we need to find solutions for that. And third, we have to look into sustainable economy. We have to change the economy. There's no use to conserve nature if we do not change the way we do things, the way we use our economy. So I give you here 3 examples of how the bioeconomy can solve these problems. For example, there is a recent finding that if you use these red algae into the feed of livestock, you will reduce 80% of the methane that the cows emit. Then, if you substitute the harmful chemicals of the fertilizers with organic ingredients, like, for example, kelp, these brown algae, you also are contributing to decrease this harmful nitrous oxide. We can also replace plastics with bioplastics. It's still a field that we have to be careful in getting into, but I just want to tell you about this amazing project of the Shell Works that is using these wastes, so the shells of the crabs and the shrimps, to create bioplastic for cups and pots to put the plants, which is quite impressive. So I do believe that youth has a big role in finding these climate innovative solutions. Why? Because youth has no strings attached. They don't have a reputation to protect. They are, in fact, starting to build their reputation. And if they advocate for climate solutions, we will only respect that. Youth also think outside of the box, which is quite interesting because usually people that are so in the system usually don't make the questions that are really needed and that are really disruptive to change something. So I believe that youth really brings that to the table. Then we are natural good communicators. I'm not saying that we are all public speakers, but the youth was raised with phones and with social media, so we do know how to use a camera, and we do know how to reach an international audience. We are socially conscious. We want to work in companies that really care about social issues and environments, and we get people's attention. If we are discussing a topic that older generations should have already solved, this is going to make people talk. That's why the Swedish activist Greta Thunberg managed to have so much attention, because she's so little and she's taking care of so much that the older generation should already be doing. So I wanted to tell you about some tools and some things that can help youth bring new solutions. The first example is an ideation and acceleration program promoted by Oceano Azul Foundation and Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation called BlueBioValue. And this is a way of giving support to both ideas or already established startups that wants to bring solutions to the ocean. And through these programs, people can get mentorship, can get new tools of management and access to capital, which is really interesting. The applications will open soon, so do stay aware of that. Then there is citizen science projects that I really love. It's a way of involving youth in science, because scientists need data and the youth needs to be more close to the nature. So this is a fantastic way of making that happen. Then there is youth recognitions. I really think that we should continue to support youth. we need to give the stage to youth, just like this conference is doing, because there is plenty of youth that is really doing great things. I give my example. In my lifetime, I applied to these two award recognitions, and one related to my research and another related to communication, and it really impacted my career. So this is really good, and people should not only apply for it, but continue to host these kind of recognitions. Then policy action. This is crucial that the youth is engaged from an early time. I give you my example. I wasn't. Just when I start working, I was involved in policy action, and we should do this from college, and we really have to incentivize that. And finally, youth communities. It's so important that we join communities, not only the ones that think like us, but also the ones that do not think like us. I give you two examples. Lidera, that is a national community of Portuguese people from different backgrounds that think all very differently, but they all want to make a society more sustainable. So this is very interesting. And then I am a part of another community of all Atlantic Ocean Youth Ambassadors that are all marine scientists, but they are from different countries. So I always learn about different challenges that the countries are facing. And both networks are really good for me, and I'm sure for other youth too. So these are my advices. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Raquel. We are looking forward also to hear the questions of all our audience. I remember that we have a chat box where everybody can put the doubts or write the questions, and the speakers will answer. By the way, I just want to announce and remember a very short notice information that we have already today. In the audience, we had 1,200 people, more than 1,200 people in the audience. That's absolutely impressive, outstanding, because an issue and subject like this suddenly to be so sensitive for all the people around the world, finally we are capturing the attention of the world and of the experts in this matter. For now, we want to hear Sara Aparício. Sara is an Earth observation data scientist at the European Space Agency. For the past years, she has been involved in numerous Earth observation activities, lately with growing focus in artificial intelligence for EO activities, and has also been involved in several networking and outreach actions for the agency. Currently, she is also doing a PhD in the areas of combination of AI and multi-sensors EO for the study of cryosphere and climate change. Hello, Sara. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, so first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me for this amazing event, and congrats for the organization and also the moderation. I will start this talk. This will be a bit storytelling style, and I will start this talk about mentioning something a professor of mine said back in university times. He was a very serious guy, but also funny. And once he arrived to the class and said, you know, you can predict the weather for the next 3-5 days. That's called weather forecast. That's doable. But if you want to predict the climate for the next 30 years, and then he made us a lot of suspense, he said, that's black magic, guys. That's never going to happen. It's too complex. And those words mark me a lot. And this talk is about how we try to compensate for that. I'm going to talk about the data we can get from space and all the potential that comes with it, and also some constraints we have about it. So nowadays we are witnessing an exponential increase of satellite data. And to say a great amount of data, it's euphemism. It's huge. For the past 10 years, over 40 companies have launched satellites for Earth observation purposes, and these companies are delivering around 100 terabytes of data per day. But what means hundreds of terabytes? I normally like to use this scheme because it's very visual and it's already outdated. This was published in 2011, but it's very interesting. This was an estimation of the increase of volume of Earth observation products. And you see that dot over there, it's 1 petabyte of data. If we have a regular computer and we wanted to download that amount of data into our computer, it would take us around 2.5 years to get all the data. It's very impressive. But I want to focus on the Copernicus program. This is the largest Earth observation program in the world, and it has open data for everyone, and it's delivering 250 terabytes of data daily. The satellites of this program are called the Sentinels, and they are numbered from 1 to 6. And here you can see the portrait of the family. And it will also be fair to not mention the Explorers, which are other satellites that are focusing specific climate change related challenges and are using new technologies on the payloads. And yes. So all these satellites, they see very different things among them because all of them have different sensors looking at different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. I will focus on Sentinel-1 because it's my favorite. This is a radar satellite, so it can see through clouds, and it's used for numerous types of applications, from monitoring sea ice, urban planning, traffic in the ocean, even for management of after disasters. In this example over here, we can use Sentinel-1 to see the flood areas. And normally when we have a flood, it's because it rained a lot and normally it's covered with clouds. With this Sentinel, you can provide information where is the flooding, even if the atmosphere is full of clouds. You can also use it to see oil spills, and also its twin, its sister, let's call this way, Sentinel-2, which is optical satellite, is also used for detect these algae blooms that Raquel mentioned earlier. And also it can be used it can also be used to understand the bleaching of the corals as a consequence of the warming temperatures. Yesterday, someone mentioned the fires that happened here in Portugal. Unfortunately, this satellite, which is an optical one, it sees in other areas of the electromagnetic spectrum that our eyes cannot see. So it allows to depict other information that human eye could not see. For instance, here we can see the burn scars from this terrifying fire that took place. Also, going back to radar, Sentinel-1 is widely used for cryosphere monitoring. Here we have the example of this A68 iceberg that calved, and weeks before it happened, scientists already knew that it was about to happen because the Sentinel offers the possibility of understanding changes to the centimeter level, which is a technique also applied for monitoring the disasters after earthquakes. All the softwares used to manipulate this data are free and available at the European Space Agency websites. You can see I'm passing a bit too fast, but you can ask. I will provide a link afterwards to access this. A little parenthesis, I'm looking at melt ponds, which are these water features that appear in the Arctic as they increase the absorption of solar radiation, which increases further the ice melt. I'm interested on this because they are the cause of a huge uncertainty reactions because they are very little known, these melt ponds. To this end, I'm using the combination of these two satellites that I mentioned earlier, Sentinel-1 and 2, as the combination of these two sensors will provide a lot more of information about them. So 20 years ago, no one would tell all the increase of data that this program would actually deliver us. So now I'm going to talk about how to overcome the struggles of accessing this data. So before the user had to download the data, but nowadays we move to cloud computing systems. And the European Space Agency and the European Commission has these tools, these cloud environmental tools that brings the user to the data instead of otherwise. And for the past years, also, I have to mention Google Earth Engine, it's an amazing tool to access this data on a cloud environment. So for the past years, with increase of satellite imagery, we also had to create ways of processing, store, and handling all this amount of data. Also, the European Commission we have this concept now called the Digital Twin Earth, which is part of the strategy to address the green plan and the digital agenda, which is to create a replica of our planet and assessing it in a digital form, looking to the past, the present, and trying to predict the future. Finally, we already know how to manage access to all this data, but still it's not human possible to go through all these data sets ourselves and do the job. This is why machine learning and AI have growing a lot of interest on this. AI is the branch of computer science which tells the computer to perform a task a human could not do. On machine learning, you give these examples to the computer. On deep learning, which has been witnessing a boom in Earth observation data, it's outperforming machine learning nowadays, and it's very data-hungry architecture. So in machine learning, basically, I'm going to give a very big overview. I think David will address this. We look at data and we tell the model to what target we are interested in to classify or predict. We train the model, and then our computer is able to perform these tasks based on the examples we provide them, either for classification purposes, to detect features on the ground, or even to make predictions. However, truth to be told, climate change is still highly complex, as my professor once said. And even though machine learning has been available for decades, the infrastructures we had so far were not enabled to tackle this challenge yet. So AI is good to increase a human's performance and speed up process. But the added value of AI is to try to see connections that we could not do before. And one big field that holds a lot of potential is the teleconnections, is to make the machine by itself be able to see patterns across the planet and link them both. So how is the surface of the temperature of this surface temperature here is affecting rainfall in the other side of the planet? Finally, going back to the less complex field, the amazing times we are facing is that even someone who is not experienced in programming or Earth observation can go online and access this data. And we are witnessing a lot of scientists also going online and sharing this on social media, which is amazing to spread science and true news. And finally, I have to mention this as well. As a result of the COVID situation, the European Commission and European Space Agency joined forces and created this website where any user can explore and see the impacts of COVID in our planet, in Europe in this case, and in agriculture, air quality, and water quality as well. So to finalize, the younger generation has it all, the current generation has all of it. Before, all this space data was not available to the users, but now it is, because most of the things that I've been mentioning are open and free for all. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much, Sara, and thank you for trying to make black magic and to have so many people trying to produce black magic. Thank you. And now, time to hear David Dow. David is the founder of GainForest, a non-profit grantee of Microsoft's AI for Earth program, aiming to reverse deterioration of nature by combining decentralized finance with intelligence ecosystem monitoring. He's a PhD student at ETH Zurich, building AI and data systems for sustainable development. Hello, David, and welcome. Yeah, I know you have something to share with us about leveraging artificial intelligence to help restore the natural world.
Thank you so much for the invitation to speak at this conference. And so So great work for the moderation and so far for the event. That has been amazing. So my name is David Dow. I'm the founder of GainForce and a PhD student at ETH Zurich. And this presentation will be a little bit different. It will be a little bit about storytelling and about two big main ideas I want to share with you guys. The title of this talk is to leverage artificial intelligence to help restore the natural world, but it's going to be a little bit less, a little bit different from what you expect. The focus will not be about measuring, but it will be about action. So let me start with a little story about how I started with this topic. So my background is I started as a young engineer in Silicon Valley, working in machine learning, trying to work on self-driving car technologies. But my family themselves, they are from the rainforest of Vietnam. And every so often I visit them and see the influences of how people live in forest communities, as well as what deforestation can cause towards a small community. When I visited South America, first time in Brazil, I saw the scales in a much bigger scale I've never imagined. Like deforestation, for example, and that's one of the big things I want to mention here and also bring up in my opportunity to talk here, is that deforestation itself, we know forests about something that captures carbon and is good for the environment. But when we burn forests, when we burn a tree, it is a carbon bomb. It releases all the carbon that has been stored over centuries, and people estimate, individual resources estimate that up to 20% of global emissions actually come from these burned forests. Here's an Earth observation analysis of the deforestation rates in Brazil that has been increasingly, and it's undeniable that we can see from space how we're destroying our ecosystems. One important thing I want to mention is that oftentimes the people who live in these forests are forgotten. I'm so thankful that this conference provides us youth a voice to present our ideas and topics, but it also needs to emphasize the voices of indigenous people, local communities, people who actually work at the front line of climate change right now, who suffer the consequences of our actions, of not caring about the environment, and of releasing effects that will ultimately change the world how we know it. Deforestation is so big, actually, that when we think about it as a country, emissions-wise, it's the third largest country in the world emissions-wise, right after China and the US. We know that, of course. The UN know that, regulations know that. So there has been financial payout programs to support these local communities to really make a difference, protect the forests, reverse deforestation, replant, stop the damage and replant, start the repair of our ecosystems. There are $25 billion alone in funds such as REDD+, like reducing emissions of deforestation and degradation. And they are reserved for when you can show results, you get that money. But that's where the problem starts. And that's where really emphasis on how artificial intelligence can help really can live through. Because it is very difficult to monitor progress in reforestation and protecting deforestation. Because what happens currently is people go into a forest, they literally measure a tape band, the width of a tree, and you don't really know who owns the land. It's really expensive. It costs up to $30,000 for like a medium scale land size. It's inaccessible for small communities. And let's don't talk about indigenous people. Like there's just too much bureaucracy, illiteracy for them to even support and receive these funds. So the main first big idea I want to give you guys today is we talked about the data revolution that is enabled through Earth observation. And we talked about the ability that artificial intelligence can leverage these data to gain insights. There is 3 levels of data, actually. There's Earth observation, satellite monitoring. There's drone monitoring for forests. And there's field monitoring, which is citizen science-based analysis that has been talked about. Earth observation provides us with a unique opportunity. It's very auditable. We trust on ESA's resources, and it can help us link these different kind of levels of data sources together such that we generate trust. If land communities, instead of hiring a third party to report their progress, can just fly a drone themselves or take a picture of the tree themselves to report if they actually make progress on reforestation and stopping deforestation, we don't trust them maybe. And that's where Earth observation can shine. We can provide Earth observation as a means of trust center and then trickle down the trust towards citizen science curated data. This is the first main idea I want to provide you guys with. And it's really important that these technologies which we develop in artificial intelligence are open and non-proprietary, because we need to emphasize the trust for these systems such that communities that usually don't have access to financial funds can use these open scalable systems to monitor the area, to scale how much progress they've done. And that's why at CrowdLab at ETH Zurich, we're developing a platform called restore.eco, which you can visit now. The launch is on June 5th, where we are providing an open platform combining all the ecological insights, data tools we developed over the many years we worked on the artificial intelligence tools for free for the global restoration movement. So this will be about sharing ecological data. You will be able to monitor the plots where you have land and will allow transparency for the donors. And more than 26,000 projects have signed up so far. We released an app where you can walk in the field, take a picture of a tree, and it will analyze the carbon stored in the tree automatically. And we released that app 3 weeks ago, and more than 10,000 individual trees has been uploaded so far. But that's not enough. And this is the last and second main idea point I want to bring up, is that we need to think what is actually needed. Measurement is just the first step, but we don't value what we can measure. But what really communities, local communities, indigenous people care about is actual funding. How do I get sustainable funding? How do I rely on continuous funding for me and my project? I don't want to worry every day if I cannot fund this project, so we need to think further. And Gainforce, I'm very, very happy to announce that we are launching, as of today, the white paper of a Gainforce, which is a description of the system, how we're trying to tackle the continuous funding problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to release tokenized data assets. So data monitored can be used as some kind of verified proof for local communities to receive continuous funds. And how this works is following. Imagine you a local community tokenize the land, so create a digital good that they can sell off, such as here we're working with the indigenous people in Brazil, a token of their land. And now when you own this token on a blockchain system, this token will increase in value depending on how well this land is getting restored and protected. And we can link that using the artificial intelligence methods we just announced. And there's even a small trick. They provide for their land, the more this asset you own, this digital asset, this virtual asset, will generate in value, and also the more additional cryptocurrency coins we can mine from it. We call this concept proof of care. And proof of care already is deployed in pilot projects from past years, where we tried to see if we can use artificial intelligence-induced payment systems, results-based payment, without the bureaucratic and legal friction that is currently in bureaucracies, but directly using an end-to-end connection using technologies such as a decentralized blockchain-based system. We've showed that this is possible. We did our first transaction to the indigenous community of the Cabo in 2019, where they received funds from cryptocurrency. And we are hoping to bring this idea even forward and further, such that any restoration project, any person, any forest community that doesn't have financial access right now to those billions of funds that they need to do their work properly, can generate access and get access from our system in the future. So if you want to learn more about this, please visit our website, gainforce.net. We also have Twitter, LinkedIn, of course, being a youth representative, and Instagram account. And I'm happy to answer any questions that come up. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
So much, David. Thank you. And now another speaker. This time is Ana Noronha. Ana is an executive director of Ciência, Viva, the Portuguese agency for scientific culture. At Ciência, Viva, she coordinates initiatives about education and public awareness of science at national and international level, particularly on space science and ocean literacy. A physicist with PhD on nonlinear dynamics, presently she is serving a 2-year term as coordinator of Blue Skills and Ocean Literacy. We could say a lot of things during this afternoon about all your experience, Anna. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for this invitation. Please don't put the PowerPoint just yet, because I'd like to start by telling the story. So I'm very happy to be here among these young people. We are always inspired to hear from them and from their projects. But today I would like to talk about much, much younger people, and I will try to convince you that it is never, never too early to start. So I am going to talk about climate from space and some projects that we developed with children. And when I say children, is really children from 6 years old to K-12, so 18 years old. Children are very curious, as you know, and often when they go to school, that curiosity is cut. By many reasons. One of them is that sometimes teachers, particularly teachers in primary education, in primary school, are not trained in science. And so they simply cannot answer the questions that the children put, or they can even answer wrong things. So our emphasis at Ciência Viva, in the collaboration we have with the European Space Agency, the Zero Portugal, the emphasis is on training primary teachers, and then afterwards first cycle, so until 12, 14 years old. We also work a lot about the ocean and about climate, and in making visible for the public at large, but also for children, how the ocean impacts climate and climate is impacting the ocean. But I'm going to show you, and now please, I would like to have my slides, a little story from a project that is developed. It's a project from the ETH Department of Education, where some Portuguese schools participate, and it's called Climate Detectives. So Climate Detectives is about a school choosing a place and with an environmental problem and dealing with it using Earth observation. And this is an example I would like to bring to you, because we believe this is the way to go regarding teaching climate from space. Images from Earth observation are very, very abstract, as you know. So most people, and particularly children, when they look at an image of Earth observation, they see a blur, they see a nice picture, but people don't understand because they are very, very abstract. So here, children can go to the Earth observation browser that, as Sara was presenting before, is very easy to use, and they can monitor a place that they choose to study. In this case, these children from rural media in inner Portugal decided to study a little lake and the evolution of the lake in winter and in summer, following how the weather and how the weather would change the appearance of the lake, and connecting it with the images from Earth observation that we're getting. So they would go regularly to the lake and collect water and look at the animals that they had there, so as to be able to correlate the biodiversity status and the quality of the water with what they saw on the satellite and with the physical conditions that were at that period. For this involved a whole mobilization of a school. So they used the physical education to do the walking, to go of some kilometers, to go to the lake. They used the chemistry to make the analysis of the water. They used the biology. So the project was involving all the school and all the teachers from different disciplines. So like this, the school also got to know the problem and to be acquainted with this problem. Then they would analyze, and as you see, these are kids of about 12 years, so they are really young. So they could correlate what they saw in the Earth observation browser with the variables with the data that they collected, the animals they analyzed, and the water they analyzed. This is also an early introduction to data and to using data, collecting data, and how to store data. So we can further build on this to introduce other concepts that will be important later on. Just to end the series of slides, we have also prepared first cycle course based on space. We have everything that is taught in primary cycle, from mathematics to the study of the environment, to the animals, to climate, to changes of water, to what are clouds, etc., etc., all explain as a function of space, and with the space images and very simple experiments that children can do to use with space. So this is now available online, and it's available in Portuguese and in English, and we are training the teachers across Portugal with the use of the science centers we have. We have a network of 20 science centers across Portugal who network with the schools around to give this course and other courses. So this is really being applied in the schools. We also have a network of more than 200 science clubs where teachers dedicate a part of their time to nurture projects from their students, which can be about space or about the ocean or about biology, about anything they want, but they have to develop projects and to disseminate them in the community. So we hope that space will enter the education and Earth observation will be used across the different disciplines in our schools to study everything from forest fires to the ocean to climate change, to everything. So these were the slides with the examples I was bringing here to you, and I would be available to talk afterwards and to answer questions. But what I wanted to show is that it is never too early to start, and that you can introduce very abstract and sometimes technical topics in basic education to children if you partner with the teachers and with the scientific institutions who help us to train the teachers, and if we provide them with the necessary resources, which are knowledge resources, not necessarily funding resources. This is easy to do. all the things of these courses can be done just with very simple everyday materials. So this can be applied everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And now the last but not least, Brandon. This is going to be so hard for me to pronounce your name. Sorry, I'll try my best. Brandon Lechinsky. No. Yeah! Brandon, you're a master's student at the Department of Aeronautics, Nautics and Astronautics and Technology and Policy program at MIT. He works with a Polo professor and former NASA Deputy Administrator, David Newman, building AI tools to adapt to climate change and educational tools to stop it. Prior to graduate school, Brandon worked as a data scientist at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, where he developed technologies for American security. Hi, Brandon, welcome. I know that you're going to talk with us and share some information and knowledge about Herd DNA, Connect, Empower, and Engage.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'd love to share those slides. I recently read a book called The Ministry for the Future, which I highly recommend. In this book, it's ultimately a hopeful book on climate change, about as hopeful as it gets at least, but it opens on some of the grimmest writing that I've ever read, as the author puts you in the middle of a heat wave in India, and he describes in raw and excruciating detail just one of the implications of climate change. It certainly feels sometimes like that's where we are headed. We know that greenhouse gases are now at 412 parts per million, although in the last 300,000 years, they've always been below 300 parts per million. We know that the global temperatures have been rising, unsurprisingly. In the 1950s, we see lots of red and blue, but as we get closer to present day, we see the Earth gets redder and redder and redder as the planet warms. I think now it's actually over 1 degree Celsius, if I'm not mistaken. And we know that even small changes, on average, can lead to huge changes at the extremes. And that's why even that 1 degree Celsius matters a great deal, because wet places get wetter, dry places get drier. At the same time, climate change is complicated. There's a lot going on in atmospheric physics. And in the US, at least, there's been pushback to the idea of climate change. It's exacerbated by the media, which until recently has shown debates about climate change as though both sides have equal legitimacy. It's further exacerbated by corporate interests, like these guys, funneling money into misinforming the public. So the Koch brothers, ExxonMobil, and other fossil fuel organizations are quite ready to spend money on misinforming the public when it comes to this issue. Now, I know that Europeans do better. I know that in Europe, 93% of people actually see climate change as a serious problem, and that's wonderful. That's a really critical first step. But even in Europe, there's still room for improvement. Europe is the world, but there's room for improvement even in Europe. This is according to the Climate Change Performance Index, which looks at climate policy, energy use, renewable energy, and greenhouse gas emissions. And like I said, certainly many parts of the world are doing worse than Europe, but I think we all have work to do. And so knowing all this information, I always wondered, why is it taking so long? We've known about climate change since the 80s, at least. I mean, we've had pretty good certainty for many decades now, and yet it really feels like it's taking a long time to act. I think the reason that it's taken so long is because climate change is what's called an adaptive challenge. In technical challenges, you can see that dark black arrow on the left of this graph. There's some kind of disequilibrium that spikes, and then experts can come and address the problem, and the disequilibrium reduces. But in adaptive challenges, you can't solve it with experts. The people with the problem are the problem, and therefore the solution. The obstacles are not time and money and expertise. The obstacles are people's values and habits and assumptions. And so with adaptive challenges, what's required is to keep people in a productive zone of disequilibrium. If they're too comfortable, there's no reason to reflect. There's no reason to introspect. There's no reason to learn or adapt. But if they're too uncomfortable, then they're frozen. And so with adaptive challenges, the goal is to simply keep people in this space of productive disequilibrium, productive discomfort, while people figure out what's worth keeping, what's really critical, and what needs to change. With adaptive work, it's really important to engage all the stakeholders, and I think this is where youth comes in. Young people are, as usual, a source of hope. In the US, unfortunately, they're often left out of the conversation. Many US states don't require climate education, and again, I know Europe does better, with Italy making headlines for requiring yearly climate education. But, as was mentioned earlier, studies show young people are mature enough to understand complex concepts, while also being open-minded enough to take in new perspectives. And I think most importantly, they are members of their parents' trusted networks. So they're actually ideally suited for generating this productive disequilibrium and helping us move forward in the process of adaptation. That brings me to EarthDNA. EarthDNA is a nonprofit started by my advisor, and within that organization, I created the Ambassadors Program, which prepares young people to lead in climate change, to generate adaptive work. In particular, our goal is to connect leaders, empower students, and engage the world. When it comes to connecting leaders, we have opportunities for people to interact via social media, but really the big thing here is creating this community in the first place, creating a holding environment for people to meet. As one person wrote in an anonymous survey, it's really energizing to interact with others that share similar values, and EarthDNA provides that community. Next, we aim to empower students. I curated a 10-week leadership training program that is based on materials at the Harvard Kennedy School and MIT. It starts with self-awareness, really deep introspective work, which builds listening and empathy, and ultimately allows students to dig in to core leadership skills like negotiation, storytelling, and communication. When we look at survey data, we find that our leadership training actually improves participants' negotiation and communication skills. So before versus after, we gave people survey questions, and we saw that after 10 weeks of training, there was a shift upwards of around 0.89 on a scale of 1 to 7, and the amount of people who said, I am assertive when I negotiate. So people ended up being more assertive. Similarly, there was an improvement in the extent to which people could plan presentations effectively, as well as design presentations effectively. So we see upwards shifts in all of these really critical skills, negotiation and communication. But for me, even more importantly, is the fact that we actually changed people's mindsets. So again, looking before and after, we asked people, to what extent do you agree or do you disagree with the statement that good leaders are just born with it? And we found that after training, there was a huge downward shift, meaning people were likely to disagree more with the statement, good leaders are just born with it. Similarly, they were likely to disagree more with the idea that good negotiators are just born with it. They were likely to disagree more with the idea that good communicators are just born with it. And really what this means is that we have changed their mindsets with respect to learning leadership, communication, and negotiation. It's no longer an innate skill that some people have and other people don't. It's something that they can learn. And that's, I think, a really critical first step on the way to becoming an effective leader. Finally, our last goal is to engage the world on climate. And we do that through a Climate 101 workshop, which covers the truth, the consequences, the myths, and the future of climate change. It covers science, economics, and politics all in 45 minutes with an interactive and interdisciplinary approach. And again, here we looked at survey data, and we found that it improves climate literacy and it increases climate concern. So from before to after, we took 2 surveys, one right before the presentation, one week after, and we saw an upwards shift in the amount of people who agreed that climate change is mostly caused by human activities. We saw an upward shift in the number of people who believed, most scientists believe climate change is happening. And we saw an upward shift in the number of people who are worried about climate change. I think, again, most importantly, though, it's really about changing behavior. And our Climate 101 workshop actually inspires an increase in climate conversations. So we see an average shift of about 2 additional climate conversations, meaning if we were to give this workshop to 100 people, in the week afterwards, we would have generated around 200 additional climate conversations. And that's exactly the kind of productive disequilibrium that we are trying to create in order to address the climate crisis. By the end of the Ministry for the Future, Robinson manages to paint a hopeful but realistic picture of solving climate change and the discomfort and disequilibrium that will make that change possible. We have our own internal adaptive work to do as an organization, but in the meantime, I'm thrilled that Earth DNA can play a part in preparing young people to play a role in our climate adaptation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Brandon. You were almost a spoiler for the book. Thank you so much. Time now for some answers from our audience. Incredible how the audience is so curious about what you think about these programs and about their experience. It's very, very impressive. So the first question is for Cassia. Cassia, are you there with me? With us? Cassia, can you hear me? I don't think Cassia is listening. Hello, Cassia?
Yes.
Yes, we have the first question for you and from the audience. As an active representative of young generations towards action on climate, you already... Are you listening?
Hello? Hello?
I don't know if she can hear me doing the question. I have some doubts. Cassia, are you listening to me? We're going to take care of audio from Cassia's network connection, and I'll go to the next question. Is for Raquel. Raquel, can you hear me? Please say yes.
Yes, now I can hear it back. There was a problem with my...
Yes, can you take please off the sound of Cassia, because we'll be back to Cassia now. I'll make the question to Raquel, okay? Raquel, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
I am here.
We have a question from the audience. It is a reality that climate change has been having tangible impacts on the ocean ecosystems and its overall temperature. In general, particularly for young generation, is there sufficient awareness that each and everyone's actions and behavior do really matter for building a better and cleaner Earth? Do you preserve that from your involvement in these issues?
Yes, the answer for that question is yes. The climate change is having huge impact in the ocean. Not sure if the person listened to my presentation, but coral bleaching, sea level rise, impacts on fisheries, there is a lot of impacts going on. And yes, I think the work that I've been doing in my free time is to work with schools. I go to some schools to talk about what I do. What I think is that the young people are not aware about the marine forests, and this has been something that I advocate for. We need to protect the marine forests that are really helping us combat climate change, like just the terrestrial forests. They play a key role in fighting climate change because they capture all the carbon, and they are also burning in a certain way, but we don't see them. They don't have smoke coming out from the marine forest. So I usually tell them about the impacts of trawling. That is a way of fishing that destroys the soil of the ocean. And has a lot of impacts in all the marine ecosystems, and also the dredging that we so often do in our estuaries. And I explained to them that this carbon that is there in the soil is going back to the water, and that then is going back to the atmosphere as well. So this is something that I feel that the young people don't know. But again, I would love that in my time when I was young, I would have like Ciência Viva working with my school, because I think the work that Ciência Viva is doing is really important and is really making the difference. And connecting the youth with also people that are working in the field is very, very important.
Thank you, Raquel. Hopefully, Cassia is already listening to me now. Can you hear me, Cassia?
Yes.
Okay,
now they open.
We have a question from the audience for you. As an active representative of young generations towards action on climate, you already mobilized youngsters in several countries. Is it hard to get funding support to your initiatives and to mobilize ambassadors to these endeavors in collecting a wider network of followers for waking interest and acting for a better future? I guess it is probably,
Yeah, totally. And a former speaker also mentioned that. I think it's the main challenge because even in my case that I worked at the Brazilian Forum on Climate Change, that I know many donors, is still way more difficult to fundraise for initiative focused on youth. Even though we have seen the power of young people in the last few years, how much it changed and put the topic in the agenda. And even Europe, that is a leader on this issue, we have challenges to access funding because it's very complicated to do a proposal. So we need help, perhaps, from other organizations. And I'm talking as youth-led organizations, but also as in our case, because we're still fundraising, we are writing proposals all the time. And it's very difficult to navigate all the needs, and oftentimes, even for what is considered small amounts of funding for the European Union, they will request that you are you have at least 3 years of organization very open and audit and many things that most of organizations focus on youth. They don't have either because they just started or because we need a lot of money just to hire an auditor, and if you have very little funds, we are going to focus on other things to keep our projects going. So I believe that is crucial, and we had made few proposals on this regard for donors. For example, there are donors that when they are fundraising, now, when they concede the funds for organizations, they require that a percentage of the amount is used for hiring women, for example, to their activities. We should do the same for young people, because most of the funding for climate change is going to hiring older people, people with at least 5-10 years of experience. So we need also to put requirements to enable that young people are hired through these funds, but also to help them in the process of securing funds. So I would totally agree. And if anyone here has any tips on that or want to support us in this process, we are my time, half of it is writing fundraising proposals right now.
Thank you, Cassia. Sara.
I hear.
The question for you is, within your presentation of ideas, artificial intelligence is a fundamental instrument to analyze and correlate the enormous amount of data. This is naturally attractive to youngsters, but are there sufficient skills in this domain to face this challenge?
Others, sorry, can you repeat?
Are there sufficient skills in this domain to face the challenge?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. If that is sufficient.
In your presentation of ideas of artificial intelligence or AI is a fundamental instrument to analyze and correlate the enormous amount of data. And the audience asks you if this is naturally attractive to the youngsters, but there are sufficient skills in this domain to face the challenge. Are they prepared
Okay, now I understand. Okay, sorry, I was not understanding. Well, this is a topic that is being heavily discussed in European Space Agency. Is the fact that there is the community of Earth observation scientists, and we have on the other hand the community of AI people, and there's been many activities trying to merge these communities to speak with each other. So this is a very specific niche currently. People who grab both skills from Earth observation and also from AI.
Thank you. And now, David, we have more than one question for you. Amazing. Are you impressed? We have the first one. Do you want me to say the two questions all the way and you'll answer together, mixing them up? Or do you prefer one question, you answer it, and I'll do the other one?
One question after the other, please.
Well, okay. So the first one is it's a compliment. Appreciate it. It's a compliment, because very interesting, the idea of a funding system to less wealthy communities that still can contribute to climate goal. Did you manage to get any institutional support, or is it this for from private or company funding?
So the main donations we have and the main donations we want to incentivize is from private, because these are the people we are missing right now in the funding system. We have billions of dollars from governments. We have rich philanthropists who donate money to climate action, but we don't really have citizen engagement yet. And the idea of GainForce is to open up this additional bridge to have like individual donors such as you and me, and the young generation, for example, to also have an impact, even if it's a small one, on the reforestation or conservation project they care about. So what we do is actually we incentivize. So the donation system we provide and we offer is hopefully better than the existing ones, because what we try to do is we really want to make your donation very tangible. So you're gonna buy a virtual token that represents actual land in the Amazon rainforest. For example, when we talked about the indigenous community token, and that every time funds are only getting released, so you're donating to that area, but funds are only getting released when certain milestones are achieved through Earth observation and something we call proof of care. And that makes really your donation much more personal than it would otherwise be. You donate to a big organization, and then it's very anonymous, and you don't really know what happens to that, right? And we think this is one of the reasons why people, especially private citizens, are less hesitant to donate, and has been so far taken over by the public sector. So yes, we try to receive donations from all different kind of sectors, but our aim is to empower the people who are usually left behind.
David, before I'll present you the next question, let me just say that you're probably seeing already, but behind me, this is a live image of the outside of the International Space Station, and it's amazing how these guys are outside doing stuff, and it's an incredible image. The proximity is so fake, but we can also imagine what they think and they feel being there and watching the Earth from there, this blue planets that they're helping to take care. This is a great opportunity to see their works outside the station. It's quite incredible and impressive. David, the next question is, how could this project bring true autonomy and prosperity to these communities instead of capital, a currency from which they're thankfully disconnected with?
Yes, so that's the first idea, was that Earth observation can provide trust towards citizen science curated data, right? That is the first idea. We have satellites, we have drones, we have field-based measurements. If we ask landowners to self-report progress, of course, because money is in the game, there are different kind of incentives that would try to make you report different kind of facts. And that's where Earth observation can actually play a huge role to trickle down the trust from NASA and ESA towards local communities. And we can provide some guarantees how truthfully these have been reported. And that opens up a new way of providing dignified work to these communities. Because now your task is your goal to basically incentivize donations from private citizens like us is to report progress, right? And now you can walk around. So that's why we developed the app called Tree App, which you can find in the Google Play Store. As of right now, you can walk around, take pictures of your trees. We store the GPS coordinate, we store the information, and we transparently monitor for you. And we will also verify through observations how truthfully that is in a certain realm. And that basically can be considered as not just a donation, but actually dignified work opportunity for communities to connect them to the digital economy, which they are currently not. Right? Forest communities, you have to understand the forest provides the living livelihood for almost 2 billion people, and like 50 million people alone live in the forest, and they are disconnected from our economy right now. And with observation, of course, with the beautiful image we see right now from the Earth, things are so small, and they should be also small, and we want to create a digital economy that integrates them much more efficiently. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dao. And now, Brandon, while the astronauts are behind me doing all they have to do in the sky, in the space, I would like to make the question that was written by Antonetta. How can, in your opinion, how can human resources help to make companies more eco-friendly?
That's a huge question.
Yes, it is. It's quite a range of possibilities. Yeah.
And I think that it'll vary depending on where you are. So in the US, I think that there's much more intense focus on profit than perhaps in Europe, which is where Europeans, I think, are more comfortable with regulating corporations. And so I think that public pressure on governments to regulate their corporations can be effective, probably more so in Europe than in the US. I think that in the US, however, there's been pressure on corporations from the actual impacts of climate change. And for example, banks now are starting to ask corporations to look at the climate risks before they're willing to give out loans. I imagine something similar is happening in Europe as well, although I'm certainly not sure. So I would say public pressure would be one way, and another way would be to require or somehow motivate lenders to assess climate risks when they give loans to some of these corporations.
Thank you, Brandon. Anna, the fantastic initiatives from Ciência Viva you just shared can be fundamental to a more prepared and climate knowledgeable future generation. How do you make sure this wave reaches the wide landscape or primary level schools in Portugal?
Well, we are doing the best we can with the help of our science centers, which are scattered across the country, and also with the help of the science clubs that are being nurtured in most schools. Well, we have now 200, but we have a target of attaining 600. And these science clubs are really community-based. They are really local, dealing with the local teachers, creating their own partnerships, which will involve scientific institutions and science centers. So this is how we are doing this. So we not only train the teachers, but we also train the trainers of these science centers so that they can deliver the courses. And we evaluate, for the evaluation of the teachers, they have to develop the projects in the school. So this is why we are deploying these piece by piece. It takes time, but it will arrive to, it has already arrived to some thousands of teachers. So we hope that this will really have an impact. On the other hand, I would like also to comment on the question of the data from AI, from machine learning and observation.
Of course, go for it.
We are already currently also having teacher training on this topic on very basic levels with a partnership we have with IBM. And we also intend with ESA, within these zeros, ESA is also planning to introduce these kind of topics into the resources that are supplied through ESA education. But of course, this is still being done. This is not yet ready. But we are aiming at it because we understand that education cannot avoid those topics, which will more and more mainstream, and that children will have, and teachers, because children will learn very fast, but teachers will have to be empowered also to deal with these topics, because it's teachers that enable the equal access of all children to these new technologies. Because you can be sure that there are many secondary school students that will learn it by themselves. They have opportunities. They know people. They know how to use the internet, and they will learn. But from privileged communities, if they don't learn it at school with the teachers, they will not have access to these topics. So we are also starting to work on these areas.
Thank you. Next question is for Sara from Metis. And in which way can citizen science, field data and campaigns be combined with satellite data? Is it of interest to combine citizen science, fields, data, and campaigns? We're not listening to you. Probably you have your microphone off, disconnected.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So it is super interesting. And here there are two dimensions that we have to consider, because data from campaigns can be useful to validate the satellites, to understand if the sensor is working properly, and to set it to the parameters we want in order to retrieve the information, the correct information. On the other hand, going back again to AI, it's super important to have in situ data, ground data, even coming from citizen science projects, that will gather information that can enable us to train the models. We have to use actual data from in situ data, or data that is human collected and selected to train AI models. And this is one of the struggles on AI for Earth observation, is that there is a lack of training data to run the models. So it's a very interesting question. It's of super importance, actually.
Thank you. We now have a question to the panel, and I think that each one of you have different experiences, and it is important to share with us the different experiences that you have at this point. And I will start probably with Brandon. What are the difficulties that you feel in getting your voice heard at policy level? Probably this makes sense to each one of you, and each one of you will have different answers to give. So first of you, Brandon, what are the difficulties that you feel when at the policy level you have to be heard?
I think the currency of leadership is attention, and with so many challenges happening and so many problems that our policymakers have to contend with, it can be very difficult to get their attention on climate change, which maybe now feels increasingly urgent, but hasn't for a long time, and maybe still doesn't for many people. So I think the challenge is getting a sense of urgency associated with climate change. It's so slow moving and so global that I think it can be really challenging in many cases to actually get people's attention on it in a way that would promote action.
Brandon, after Brandon, Anna, do you want to share something with us?
Well, we don't, in general, policymakers like what we do and say, oh, it's very important, etc., etc. But I feel that sometimes they don't really understand the importance of it. Namely, when we need to funding, for example, for these activities, sometimes I think that we are perceived as something like a decoration, like something that, oh, it's very nice to have. But it is difficult sometimes to pass the information that this is done by professionals who are highly qualified, so that these projects cost money like any other project. So it is not just something that a nicety, let's say. It's not just a nicety.
David.
I agree with Anna so much. So like when I was very fortunate to join the last 3 COP United Nations climate change conferences, where policymakers and the people who decide on like how we are going to tackle the climate crisis are meeting together. And they always every year invite youth organizations, indigenous people, NGOs as observers. And we do feel like decoration, because one of the reasons why is they speak a different language than we do. Right, so as a youth and as someone who is also very concerned about this, because it's very on a personal level, I see the effects. My language might not be a language that a policymaker would understand when I would express it in that way. It's not only just the English language, but also the way you would approach it. Like as a single person, for example, they would say, sure, we love what you're doing and it's great, but you need to work in levels with access, such as creating institutions, creating actually legal organizations to approach them instead of individual people. So like accessing policymakers and like pushing for change is difficult when you don't understand the game, how they are like receiving information internally and how they decide. And I remember when we were in Madrid at the last COP that happened, we went for the Friday for Future movement afterwards. And Greta also attended the COP and said, yes, actually change happens here on the street and not inside the walls of COP. And I couldn't agree more, because that's where you have to get the people, the pressure to the policymakers. And that's in the end how we actually can influence change for action.
Yes, thank you, David. Sara. Well, I have to say Sara, I'm forgetting your Portuguese. Sara,
okay.
Your experience.
I don't have direct experience with policymakers, but I do have experience speaking with people from different backgrounds, and since toddlers to older people. And I think the same reasoning applies when trying to speak to policymakers. We always have to adapt what we want to say to these people. We have to show them and speak to their heart. I know this sounds terribly naive, but we have to, when we want to deliver a message important such as climate change and all the problems attached to it, we have to target specifically what will call this person attention. And we have science to back us up, so yeah, that's my input.
How do you reach the attention at the policy level?
Hello, do you hear me well?
Yes, quite well.
I'm listening to you with some cuts. Well, I would say that we need network. I think this is really important. In my case, as I also said to you in my presentation, communities and networks have opened me to a new set of skills that is engaging with people that don't talk with the same language that I talk, because I come from the scientific part, and I know that the policymakers will listen to me only if I talk with them in a way that they understand, in a simpler way with no jargon per se. And if you have a window of opportunity, take it, because policymakers are really busy, and just like Sara said, speak to the heart. They will listen to you better. But take this window of opportunity. In my case, through a community like Lidera, I connected with a policymaker that have consulted me about blue carbon. That is this carbon that the ocean captures. And actually it has included in a proposal of their party, proposal for the law of climate. So I would say that it's very, very important to network, and also to teach scientists, and I think this is very important, how to engage in public policy. because not only the policymakers have to listen to scientists, but also the scientists have to know the channels they can use and how to reach them. So I would say that these two things would be very important.
Thank you. And now, Cassia.
Thank you. For me, I believe the main challenge is not to be listened to, but to convince them to apply what I said, because I think the second step, like there are many hearings all the time, like you can apply sometimes via a website. They always select young people to go to events, but at the end of the day, we say this is important, this community needs help, and nothing is done. So what we try to propose with youth climate leaders is to be engaged in the implementation part of it. After we give our ideas, we should be like in the task force, and more importantly, we should be paid for that. And we start like charging for many of the lectures we do, or if a director of a company wants my opinion, like this is consultancy, like so I will charge you for that as well, or because they would pay for an older person. So there are many things that I think we have to consider. And hopefully, as other policymakers that are listening to us now, if you want to engage young people during the implementation process, you should perhaps also partner with a youth-led organization to help you, like to gather these young people, to train them, because it's a process. Like for a younger person, it's more difficult to participate in something that you don't understand the rules, you don't understand. So you have to educate young people and children and everyone that you want to include on these processes. And this, as the fellow panelists said, this costs money. So you have to invest on this to build the conditions for participation to begin with.
Thank you, Cassia. It's very inspiring to hear all of you. And I would pick up the words that or the expression that you use, Cassia, that it's urgent to educate children. And I would like to tell you all a little story just to close this panel and this conference. I have two sons. Well, my youngest son actually is the only son, because the other one is a daughter. But my youngest son, he has 9 years old, and he asked me last week, "Moms, what the most important thing in science, or to be a scientist?" Well, I thought that a little bit, and I answered him, well, I think that knowledge probably is the main thing that you have to use as a scientist. And he told me, "No, Mom, imagination." And it makes sense, imagination. And I asked him, "Who told you that?" And he told me, "Well, I read it, and it was Einstein." Well, I don't know if it was Einstein, because I didn't check it out. But if it was Einstein, my children probably is a genius. But if it was not Einstein, he's a liar. So either way, I have to educate him as a parent to take the right path. And I think that imagination, absolutely, it's a gifted element to start something. So in my name, in name of the organization, the technical team, and all the people and efforts that were around this conference, thank you so much to the last panel of speakers and all the speakers that join us through this 1.5 day, and particularly the audience that followed us during this time with questions, with attention, giving us all the feedback that they needed. Thank you so much. Educate the young generation, absolutely, they're the future. Climate changes are there. We have to know them, take care of them, respect them, and learn how to mitigate them and control them, so the young generation, the next generation, can have quietly a bright future. Thank you so much.
How can satellites help precise farming? Geographic Information Systems, GIS, provide near real-time data. Support management of crop types, quickly and accurately. Help identify soil composition and fertility for seasonal predictions. Disease monitoring, irrigation needs and growth patterns. Assist on best time to harvest and help producing high-quality food. Why does satellite-based traffic management matters for green mobility? Better freight coordination. Efficient communication and management of the fleet. Optimizes goods distribution. Increases efficiency and lowers environmental impact. Empowering citizens for climate action. Sensors in different geographies and climatic zones complement knowledge and improve accuracy of information. On use of resources. For weather forecast. Communities can share information using data space-based applications. United citizens-based climate action can lower CO2 emissions. On energy and water needs. To link citizens to science.